Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, the place where your spirit goes when something tells you it might be time to change direction. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Crossroad Diner. I'm your host, Steve McCurdy, and our show started with me talking to a bunch of friends in show business and has grown. We've gotten some interest from folks who have books and who are speakers, and today we've got one of those with us. Brenden Kumarasamy, please welcome to the Crossroad Diner.
Steve, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
That's a joy. So I've briefed you a little bit about, what it is to be in the diner. Tell us a little bit about, when you were young, how that influenced and what direction that put your heart to go.
Absolutely, Steve. So the journey starts in Sri Lanka, which is a country south of India. My parents immigrated from there in the early 90s, and I was born in Montreal, thankfully for me, in Canada in the mid 90s. So I always like to say that I was given the golden ticket of life, but mostly in terms of the country that I was born in. In terms of my childhood, though, even if I was a born Canadian, I'm super thankful for it. I definitely had my fair share of struggles. I didn't grow up with a lot. Both of my parents were factory workers. They were both on minimum wage. So for me, a lot of my childhood was really about money because we didn't have a lot about it. And my dad was an alcoholic. So it was a real struggle. So for me, the question, my focus, similar to what you actually touched upon prior to pressing record, which I completely agree with, is when you don't come from a lot, you don't really think about saving the world. You focus your life on scarcity, right?
And survival, getting survival met.
Exactly. So when I was 12 years old, funny story around that, a career counselor came up to us. I'm 13 years old right now, just for your audience, just so they know. But when I was 12, what happened is the career counselor looked at us and said, you should figure out what you want to do in life. So naturally, most people answer astronaut, stand-up comedian. You know what I answered? I answered accountant because I saw that I was really good at math and I was terrible at everything else.
Well, obviously that didn't happen. So did you follow that for a while? When you got out of high school, what did you do first?
That's actually what I did. So what essentially what happened, that's why I'm super empathetic to not going directly into your passions or your dreams. I'm a big fan of decisions over passions. So when I was 12, the answer wasn't how do I save the world? The question was more around, okay, how do I save my family here? Because they obviously worked really hard to bring me to this country. I was the first person in my generation of families to actually graduate from a university. So there's a lot of pressure on me, and pressure I put on myself, frankly, more than my parents did, to actually be successful financially. So from the ages of 12 to 20, I actually focused on being an accountant. So I studied really, really hard. I didn't even know what accounting was because none of my family members were accountants. They're all factory workers too.
Right. Or
so
needed one.
Or needed one. Yeah, that's also true. Fair enough. Right. So all of them were blue collar, not white collar. So what happened was I went to high school and I studied really hard, got really good grades in school. And then when I got to university, I actually studied and graduated in a degree in accounting. And it was in that moment that I shifted from being an accountant to doing what I do today.
Right then. What caused that change?
Right. So what happened was when I was in my first semester of university, I was 19 at this point, and my goal was to work for one of the big four accounting firms, Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, Ernst & Young. People told me I needed to work at these companies to be successful. I thought PricewaterhouseCoopers was a water bottling company, Steve. That's how lost I was. Like, I didn't know. Because remember, I had no network. I just got there in an oversized suit because I couldn't afford anything better from Sears. It was like $100 that I wore in prom. And that's what I would take to every event. So I would go up to these 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds who I thought were like gods because they had internships at PwC and Deloitte. And I was like, oh my God, if I could just get a job here, my whole life would change. But the starting salary was like $40,000 a year. But for me, $40,000 a year was like crazy. So I would go to these interns who were 2-3 years my senior, and I just asked them, hey, how did you get this job? And they all answered 2 words, Steve, and that's when the moment changed in my life. Case competitions. And I looked at them and I said, what's a case competition? Like, what is that? And they
Yeah.
explained to me that businesses sponsor a lot of these competitions, Steve, and make students do business problems to then recruit the best talent into their companies before the other companies get to them. Never heard of these things before, and most people don't know what those are. So I started competing in them, but I grew an unhealthy obsession with them because I wanted to start winning them. I'm really competitive, and I accidentally learned the art of communication and coaching it because I was helping the other students get better at these two to get jobs.
Gotcha. But so you kind of stumbled on your passion because of the necessity.
Yes, Mastertalk and everything I'm doing today, Steve, and I genuinely mean this, was 1000% an accident. My plan was very simple: to be a partner at Pricewaterhouse before I was 35. That was my goal. Because I knew, I looked at the salary ranges and I was like, oh my God, like if I get to like 300K a year, literally, that was my brain. I'm not trying to save the world. I was like, if I get there, or if I work as a consulting partner at IBM, I worked there for a few years as well. Like I could retire my mom. She doesn't have to work anymore. Like that was my goal, and to retire myself. So yeah, I wasn't thinking about the world until a year after that. And then after, everything changed after that.
Okay. So you're in this competition thing. You're by virtue of that, you've got to communicate better. How did you learn about the principles of communication that are important to you now and that you teach?
Absolutely, Steve. So early in the game, I would say a lot of my teachings were learned by myself. They were self-taught. So a lot of my coaches when I was in case competitions were people who had graduated from that very specific program. So 300-400 people apply every year to be in that case competition program, and they take 70. And I just so happened to go to the school that had the world's largest one. Like that was just luck of the draw. Right. So those individuals who had graduated from the program 10 years ago became senior vice presidents, VPs at companies 10 years later, and they come back to give back to the program. So I learned really fast because they weren't really nice people. Right. So I had a big ego. I'd give my presentation. They'd look at me and say, why am I spending time with you when I can have dinner with my family? This is horrible. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm learning. So a lot of that was that. And the other piece was when I was a year older, around 19 and a half, 20, and I started winning competitions, I kind of labeled myself as a communication coach because I noticed 20% of the delegates were not great at speaking, but I didn't know how to coach it. So I was just going like, okay, this is what I did in this presentation and this, and 80% of it was wrong. But I always kept the 20% that I was coaching them on that was working. And I kept repeating that process. So a lot of it, as we call in French, is essai erreur, right? Trial and error, until I figured out the perfect mix.
Cool. So today, you have your own company. Tell me about your book. I don't know much about your book.
Right. So another bit of misunderstanding. So I have a YouTube channel. I don't have a book yet. I will have one.
I misread that then, I guess.
You're totally fine.
See, what's happening here? What's happening here is that my audience and I are both getting to know you at the same time. So thank you for the tolerance. So straighten me out here. You've got a YouTube channel. Talk to me about that.
You're totally fine, Steve. So what happened was when I was in my last year of university, I had landed the dream job. I got a job at PwC, and then I later went on to work at IBM as a technology consultant. So I was set at this point. My starting salary was mind-blowing. It was a lot more than what I expected it to be. And I paid off all of our family debt in the first year. We had probably like 30K in debt. So I basically took my entire salary. I paid it all off in a year. And then we were okay after that. But what happened was I had coached like 60, 70 people in how to communicate ideas, just for the nature of me doing these case competitions. And one of them asked me the most important question of my life. And he just looked at me and he said, how did you learn how to speak? And I looked at it and said, what do you mean? Said, well, how did you learn how to speak, Brenden? Did you hire a coach? Did you Toastmasters? Did you watch YouTube videos? And I looked at it and I said, no, I just practiced and learned and self-taught myself. And he's like, that's weird. And then I looked at him and I said, you watch YouTube videos on communication? He's like, yeah, there's a bunch online. You should go check them out. So I had 3 months to kill, Steve, before I started working at IBM. So I sat down on my computer and I started watching all of those YouTube videos. And I was horrified by what I saw, because I saw a bunch of PhDs who were sharing tips on communication. They weren't that great at communication to begin with, because they were talking like this as they were presenting the video. Two, all of the tips weren't really practical. Since many of them are academics, a lot of their knowledge is learned in books. So they aren't actually coaching somebody else to get a result. So as they're talking, I'm like, that doesn't
Right.
work, that doesn't work. I tried that doesn't work either, because I had a bunch of practical experience. And the third piece is nobody was doing this in my age range, because it takes a long time to develop this expertise. And once again, we don't have a business yet. This is just a thought. So I just looked at my life and I said, well, I mean, I'm going to make money at IBM anyways. And this is where the transition happens from scarcity to abundance. So I just go, well, I mean, I don't have time to coach these people anymore because I'm going to be working 70, 80 hours a week at IBM to make the money that they're giving me. So I'm just going to make free videos. So I literally sat on my mother's couch. I opened a phone and I started Mastertalk. I just made a video every week. And then it just turned into something I never could have imagined.
Tell me that evolution. Tell me, what were the responses and how did that grow in such a way that you were aware of it?
For sure. So once again, this is all completely an accident, right? That's why I'm a big believer in what you shared at the beginning of the podcast, Steve, around how it's okay if you don't have anything to really focus on scarcity, to really focus on how do we get out of this. But after we learn how to survive, like I did, and for me, it was honestly just getting a job that paid well, then it opened my mind to new possibilities that I hadn't considered before. Because when you grow up in poverty, you always think that money is more important than anything else. But once you start making it, you realize, wait a second, time is infinitely more valuable than money is. But you only
but you don't get to that until the Maslow's hierarchy is handled, right? You know,
correct.
You got to get survival handled. And then, and if you're intelligent and articulate and you've been walking around in the first world of Canada, USA, free countries, you start going, okay, there's a lot. I see that there are a lot of people that are more successful than I've even dreamed about being. So that proves that it's possible. And also I've been listening to them talk and they're not that bright. So it must not be really, really hard. There just must be a way.
I mean, literally copy paste. That's what I thought too. Like when I started Mastertalk, I was like, there's no way that I am not just as smart as the people who are sharing these YouTube videos, because they're not making any sense. That's literally what my thought. Obviously, they're all friends of mine now. I'm a lot more tempered these days and more mature. But when I started the channel, that was my impression. I was like, come on, these people don't know what they're talking about. I was like, I can do something better. So I guess a lot of it was naivete, but I started just making videos with no money, no budget. At least I have lighting now to talk to. I didn't even have that. And I just posted one every single week. And my first audience was my case competition people. Because I remember I've been coaching for free. I didn't even know you can get paid to be a coach from 19 to 22. So I had helped all of my friends get massive jobs on Wall Street and consulting and all these really amazing positions. And I didn't ask them for money. So the favor is they were all watching my YouTube videos and giving me feedback and sharing it. So I just kept posting a video every week, Steve. I started in January of 19. That's when the channel started. And 9 months into Mastertalk and in that journey, I got really invested in personal development because I wanted to find out what was more for my life than just like working a corporate job, because I knew I was going to be successful at that point. So, I did the whole, the Tony Robbins, all of it. But I went to an event called Summit of Greatness by a guy named Lewis Howes in Columbus, Ohio. And I met my business partner there. And he's the one who opened my mind and said, hey, you could coach executives for money. And I looked at him and was like, are you serious? People are going to pay me to do this? And that's when the business started growing. He gave me my first 10 clients. He just really believed in me. And then I realized that instead of spending my time in corporate, which is totally a good thing to do and a fine thing to do, I realized that my ambition was actually a lot bigger, which is I could help the world master communication and become the modern day Dale Carnegie. And that became my new North Star.
Fantastic. So, so tell me what form that takes now. I know that you've still got the channel, and you do personal coaching.
That's correct. So I tried a bunch of different models because basically the thought was, because I was going to run Mastertalk regardless if I made money or not, because I was taking 25% of the money I was making in my corporate salary, and I would just make videos. Because it's not cheap to make the production I'm making these days, unfortunately for me. But what happened was the coaching actually became a really good business model where 99% of people watching my YouTube videos would just enjoy the YouTube videos. They would just watch them. They're all free. And 1% of them would watch one of them and say, well, I don't have time to watch all these videos because I'm a big time executive. I'd rather just hire the guy who's speaking directly. And that's what ended up happening. So now today my clientele are like executives, they're CEOs of massive companies in the United States and around the world, and they're other coaches, just not of communication, of career. And I was able to build a backbone in the business. But ultimately my vision is to use those financial resources, which I've done since I've quit my day job a while back, to actually democratize communication for the world. And that's my dream.
Say more about that. Democratize communication.
Sure, I'll say it through a story. I love that, Steve. So I'm watching this video, right? And the video is about Taylor Swift, the musician that we all know and love. And Taylor Swift wins an award called Woman of the Year by a company called Billboard, and it's 2014. And she looks at the audience and says, your future Woman of the Year is 11 years old right now. She's sitting in a choir. She's learning how to sing, and she has big dreams to be a singer someday. And we need to take care of her. And then 6 years later, fast forward, Billie Eilish becomes the youngest inductee in Billboard's history to win Woman of the Year at the age of 17. So she's barely a woman. She gets up on stage. She's got a big bulky jacket, big glasses. She looks at the room and says, oh my God, like, I can't believe I won, right? Because she's 17 and she's rambling. And then the last 30 seconds of what she says, Steve, changes my life. She looks at the crowd and goes, oh, yeah. And I love Taylor Swift. And I was watching her speech in 2014. And I was 11 years old. And I was in choir. And I was learning how to sing. And you all took care of me. So thank you. And the reason that solidified my mission was because I thought about the next Elon Musk, the next Oprah Winfrey, the next thought leader. Because when Elon was 13 in South Africa and being abused by his dad, nobody cared about him. Nobody sat him down and says, hey, you're going to make mistakes in your life. You're not going to be perfect, Elon, but you should probably learn how to communicate ideas effectively. And if anyone had sat him down, he would have been way more successful, even if he's already amazing and doing well. But I thought about the next Elon, because the next Elon is probably some 7-year-old girl in Cambodia. We have no idea who that person is. But I knew one thing for a fact, Steve, is whoever is going to be the next Elon or the next Oprah, it can afford a communication coach. So I thought to myself, well, if I could create these resources, that's my mission, is to empower every genius in our society for the rest of time to be an exceptional communicator. Because if all of them grew up to be exceptional speakers, the human race as a whole would evolve at lightning speed. And that is the overarching North Star of my life.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I had a logic professor say, if you can't explain an idea to me in 2 minutes, you don't understand it very well. And I have lived by that. Current marketing folks say, when you send an initial email and the ones that follow, 125 words or less is the mark. Be concise, be to the point. And to do that, it's I can't remember who it was. It might have been Twain. So, wrote somebody and said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time.
Yeah.
It takes concentration to be elegant, to get a lot out of a little. And so tell me some of the kinds of things that you teach with communication and how that works with a one-on-one with the executives.
For sure, Steve. So the way that I think about it is communication's like juggling 18 balls at the same time, right? So one of those balls is eye contact, smiling, vocal tone variety, body language, storytelling. And it gets really confusing really fast because you have all these balls in the air. So the question now becomes, what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle? Much like with fitness or going to the gym, yeah, sure, we could look at diet plans all day. But if you're not walking 15 minutes a day, the diet plans don't matter because that's the first thing that you need to do. But we don't have that manual for communication. And that's the essence of my life. And what I want to leave as a legacy is creating that manual. So let's talk about a little bit about that. So the first ball is the random word exercise. Pick a random word like cup, like lip balm, like computer screen, and create random presentations out of thin air. So there's 2 reasons why this is effective. One, because it helps you deal with uncertainty. Life is filled with it. Think about small talk. When you meet somebody new, you don't know how the conversation is going to go. So that's one. And the second one is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So that's really the magic of doing this a few times a day in the shower, with family, with kids, just with your kids. Let's say if you have any, for those of you listening to this, but the key is really just to practice this, and that will automatically improve your skills.
Yeah, I had an interview one time where the guy said, "Sell me this pen," and handed it to me, and it was like your random word exercise. Give me an example. Give us pick a word. Yeah, paperclip, and tell me how that goes.
Absolutely happy to demonstrate that. And for those who are listening, Steve did not give me the word paperclip prior to this conversation.
No,
So
I
here
did
I go.
not. I've been looking around. I've got a bent one here. Bent paperclip.
I love that, Steve. So here I go. It's Sunday morning, and I'm using my paper clips to organize all the messy papers on my desk. There's one thing that I've never been proud of myself that I hate to admit, which is I'm not that great at organization. I have a big vision. I know exactly what I need to do with my meetings. But when it comes to organization and using a paper clip, or I guess these days, the virtual paper clips of life, whether it's a notepad or a Google Calendar or a Structure or Asana, I've never been really good at using paper clips. But the reason I love talking about them so much is because they're a tiny reminder on our desk to remember to organize our dreams, our goals, our aspirations. Because if we don't use paper clips, and I don't just mean the literal term of paper clips, just if we don't organize our life altogether, we don't push the simple actions that we can do every day to organize the paperclip goals of our life, we actually won't be successful at all. So I encourage all of you to do a little bit more that I wish I did with myself and take a step back and really organize your week effectively so that you can achieve the goals and the aspirations you have for your life. And sure, you might be old school. Maybe that's about getting a bunch of paper clips together and figuring it out, or maybe it's something virtual, but the key is really to figure it out so you can organize your life to win. That's it.
Very, very, very cool. And you are encourage people to do that like 4 or 5 times a day, right?
Exactly. And a couple of other points as well for the random word exercise. The first one is people should not be comparing themselves to me. I've done it 3,000 times. That's why I do it so well.
Yeah, it's obvious that you know your way around paper
Right.
clips.
Yeah, or really anything. So that's the
or
first
random
piece.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, random ideas. So the second piece is, and this is what I tell clients all the time, Steve, we do not get paid to do it well. We get paid to do it a lot. We get points for doing it a lot. So for the first 100 times, it literally doesn't matter what it sounds like. So at the beginning, it'll probably sound more something like this. Paperclip is it's like a clip and paper, right? So you won't be that great. You'll actually be better than what I just did, to be honest.
Right.
But let's do a little bit of math, because 100 times is actually not a lot. Because if you do it 5 times a day, each random word only takes 60 seconds, Steve. So if you do that for 3 weeks, you'll have done it 100 times. And if you do it for a month, you'll have done it 150 times. That's why Alex Hormozy always says, Steve, that it's not about doing the extraordinary thing, but rather the ordinary thing for an extraordinarily long period of time. So I encourage all of you to follow that mantra as well.
Cool. So how can people find out more about you? How can they bring you into their circle of knowledge? In fact, what do you want most from my audience? How can they connect with you to benefit them and to expand your influence?
Absolutely, Steve. Such a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me. So 2 easy ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just go to Mastertalk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And the second way to keep in touch is to attend one of my free communication workshops that I do online over Zoom. These are live, these are interactive. If you're introverted, you could turn off your camera, but you can see a lot of the tips that we talked about today applied live, so that you can watch me do it. So if you want to attend that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
rockstarcommunicator.com. We'll put that on the screen for the folks that are watching, and I'll communicate it again at the end. Now, what's next for you? What's the big up level for you next that you're shooting for?
Yeah, for sure, Steve. I would say for me, the next part, the ultimate vision, right, is to share my videos, my resources with billions of people across the world. But there's a couple of steps I probably need to get before that. So I would say a lot of my focus these days is focused on 3 C's, right, which is coaching, conversations, and content creation. So I've already created a lot of my content this year,
Yeah.
and I'm still having a ton of conversations. So I would say really a lot of my focus in 23 will be around growing the coaching practice.
Good. Good deal. Well, we certainly wish you all the best with that. One of the things that my audience is the audience that I designed the show for. Well, let me just give you a little bit of background. I knew what I wanted to do from the time I was 6 years old, but
Wow.
I was being raised by parents who were from the Depression era, lack-based model, and they just simply would not support me in being a writer, actor, radio guy. So, I bought into that. I married a girl who was very much bought into that. And it was 10 years into my career, being frustrated with the stuff that I was having to do, that I realized I've got to do something creative every 8 or 9 days or I get sick. And so everything changed and I faced the consequences, but I did believe in myself. I knew I had a talent, but I didn't know if I had the knowledge for that world. I knew that you could have a lot of talent and still fail. And so I was scared. But when I finally made that turn, the failures that I had and the struggles that I had were mine. They were not the life that someone else had designed for me. And so I want to save everybody that 10 years. I want them to figure out what it is that's calling them and step into it. And because it may not be the thing, it may be the path to the thing. It may be on that path that you make the discovery. And yours was an excellent example today that you were on this path and you found yourself doing what you are great at. And then you shifted from there to pursuing it as a career. Give me your advice to my audience about how to develop that, how to be aware of that, how to shift gears, because you did a 180. I mean, you really changed direction from workaday accountancy consulting to a completely different kind of consulting, human development type stuff. So how do we tune our minds to be aware of that little voice that's calling us?
Absolutely, Steve. And this is a little bit controversial, but I hope it helps because it gives a different line of thinking.
Oh, I'll just cut it if I don't like it.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. I really believe that most of us don't make our purpose our priority. That is why we don't find the truth, because we ask the universe the wrong questions. So I'd say for me, what's helped me a lot is really making it a priority. Even before I had the idea for Mastertalk, I still wanted to make an impact when I started making money. Literally what I told myself was if I never find my purpose, if I never find what I want to do in life, at least I'll be rich being an executive and I can donate some money to charity and do something, which at the time and still is, right? Scott Harrison's foundation, Charity Water. I think the guy's brilliant. And he's solving a problem. So maybe it's just donating a bunch of money to him and living my life in luxury, and that's it. That's the way I was going to create impact. So literally, even the first 3 years of Master, I'm always happy to talk about this. All my CEO clients know this. I lived in my mother's basement, right? Because I wanted to use that extra capital and save it. Because one day, maybe I'll find that purpose someday, and then I'll need that money. And Master Talk came at the right time, at the right moment. So the advice I have for people is to ask yourself one hard question about life every single day. I call them 80-20 questions. We all know about the 80-20 principle. 20% of the results gets you 80%. 20% of the actions gets you 80% of the results. And now we need to apply that to questions. What are 20% of the questions that you can ask yourself to give yourself 80% of the clarity? So I'll give you 3, not to overwhelm your audience too much. 1, if you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? If I made you an instant billionaire, if I told you could retire right now, and it doesn't matter how old you are, 30, 40, 25, 65, what would you do with the rest of your life? Steve Jobs thought he was going to live until 65. He died in his 50s. Kobe Bryant thought he was going to live until his 80s. Died in his 40s. Important to consider that. Number 2, if you could only accomplish 3 things in your life, and only 3 things, what would you want to accomplish and why? This is called the focus question. helps you focus. Number 3, Devon Bandison's question. What's a goal or a dream that you secretly gave up on and never told anyone about? Questions lead to truth, and most people don't ask enough questions. And I'm a great example of someone who's asked thousands and thousands and thousands of questions. That's why I have the clarity of someone who's already dead.
Brenden Kumarasamy, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a real pleasure having you in the diner. We may have you back in a year and find out, what's happened since. Give us an update. I'm going to do an update show with, little bullet reports from folks. And I hope that you'll be interested in joining us for that.
More than happy to, Steve. This is a wonderful conversation. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Until next time, folks, this is the Crossroad Diner, the place your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction. And listen to Brendan's story and let it encourage you. And listen to his questions because they are excellent. And the 1 minute, 5 times a day exercise random word, that's golden. Until next time, I'm Steve McCurdy for the Crossroad Diner. See you then. Be sure to connect with Brenden at Mastertalk on YouTube and rockstarcommunicator.com. There's a lot to learn, and it's all free. Until next time, we're at the Crossroad Diner, where your spirit goes when it's time to change direction.